Welcome to the Jenni Carlson Show. This week, I am thrilled to be joined by two fellow sports columnists who have been covering Texas football for a combined 527 years. Okay, maybe not that long, but no one knows the Longhorns better than Kirk Bohls and Cedric. The Austin American Statesman columnist will talk about the Texas run defense going against Ollie Gordon and why Steve Sarkisian has been able to get the Longhorns back to a point where they're now a playoff contender. But before we get to that, I want to say a word of thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni Carlson Show. Oklahoma Ford Dealers, Two Fellas Movers, MidFirst Bank, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, FireLakeJobs.com, Next Gen Roofing, 988, Oklahoma's mental health lifeline. And remember, drive into your Best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. Also, if you're thinking about moving, let's face it, a box of pizza and a case of beer just don't work like they used to. Nobody wants to help you move. But we know two fellas that love moving. At Two Fellas Moving Company, we offer free, no-strings quotes for your move. With over 20 years experience, we've pretty much moved it all. Our services don't end at moving either. Need to do some remodeling or spring cleaning? We have you covered with dumpster rentals and junk haul services. Remember, quotes are free and there are no strings attached. If you're moving in Oklahoma, make sure to call the fellas. Visit twofellas.com for your free quote today. Well, it is Big 12 Championship Week, OSU versus Texas, and there's absolutely no one or no one's better at talking about the Longhorns than longtime Austin American Statesman sports columnists Kirk Bohls and Cedric. Kirk just celebrated 50 years at the Statesman. Oh my gosh.
I'm a dinosaur. What can you say?
I know younger dinosaurs.
Said you're just a pup compared to that. 24 now into 25 football seasons of the Statesman. I mean, you're half a Kirk.
I am half of Kirk in longevity and three of Kirk in poundage. Yes.
Well, if you can't tell, the best thing about this show this week is going to be talking to my friends. I have known you guys basically since I started in Oklahoma City, maybe even before, but we covered OU Texas game this year, but we don't always get to cover the Big 12 games together. This is a rarity, guys. It was 18 the last time Texas was there. That was against Oklahoma. Now they're back. So let's talk about this Texas team. How good is this bunch? I mean, I assume not Vince Young, Texas good, but I mean, is this a Colt McCoy good type of team? Ced, let's start with you.
That's a really good question. I think, well, they're obviously, in my opinion, they're third if we're talking about those three teams, comparatively speaking. They do figure out how to win games. But unlike those other teams, they seem to play to the competition. If they're playing a mediocre team, they may play mediocre, and this 57-7 win over Tech on Black Friday was basically a statement that they're maybe over that, but they close calls against Wyoming, Houston, TCU, teams they should have worked, but they do have star power, particularly on defense with T'Vondre Sweat. Kirk and I both agree that he's the best player on the team. And it's been a while since you can say a defensive player is the best player on the Longhorns, maybe all the way back to Casey Hampton. So that's our Derek Johnson. That's been a minute. So we like covering them. They're a fun watch, but you kind of never know what you're going to get with them.
Well, I can say the same about Oklahoma State. Kirk, you've seen these Longhorns. What's the secret sauce? I mean, winning when they need to. Obviously, that's been important. But what makes this a good Longhorn team?
It's got balance, Jenny. It's good on both sides of the ball. You got a great special teams. The kicker, Bert Auburn, missed 5 field goals all year, and he's made 19 straight. The school record was 15, and so he's blown past that. Xavier Worthy, electric punt returner, All-American candidate as a punt returner. Keelan Robinson had a 95-yard kickoff return. And they got a great punter. So that's a big part of winning these close games that Cedric just talked about. And it's very balanced. They're good on offense. They're good on defense. They're almost a guarantee to score 30 points or more every game, unless they're playing in Iowa State, apparently. But and their defense, it's the best defensive line they've had in probably 20 years. Now their pass defense, a little bit of an Achilles heel, and that's probably where they are most vulnerable. But I don't know if that's Oklahoma State's best strength, so that might balance out a little bit.
Yeah, this seems like to me when we're talking about the matchup, and we'll dive into it a little bit more later, but it feels like it's Sweat and the run defense against Ollie Gordon. Kirk, that it's a big time matchup because I feel like, we've seen Ollie Gordon have great games, but we know that UCF held him to 25 yards. I mean, this Texas run defense has been stingy at times this year.
Yeah, it really has. They've only given up, I think it's 200-yard runners, and one of them was Dylan Gabriel that we saw in Dallas, and Harrison Whaley from Wyoming went over 100. And I think, and even the one he went over 100, he went for 110, Jenny, for Wyoming. A very good running back. Then he had a knee injury. He had 110 yards. 62 came on one play. The other 17 carries, he averaged 2 yards a carry. And that's what I think Gordon's obviously he's got the capability to do that. And I'll be shocked if he doesn't break one long one Saturday at Jerry World. So, but they've been great at stuffing the run. They're fifth in the nation. And Ollie Gordon has scored, 2,000 touchdowns? Or
short of that, but a lot, yes.
Yeah, he's got 20 and 8 in the last 2 games. And I expect they'll do a pretty good job corralling him, but he's going to break loose for some. And wouldn't surprise me if he breaks a long one and get 100 yards. But he's probably going to have to get a lot of those yards on the perimeter if he can get outside.
He kind of reminds me, of some running backs we've seen play for Texas. I mean, he's big and physical and fast. And I know he's been a challenge to a lot of teams, but I mean, Texas, they've seen guys like this, but man, he looks like he could be a Longhorn running back.
He does. And before we got on the show, we were talking about Cedric Benson, the late Cedric Benson. And he kind of reminds me of Ced B because he stays low behind his pads, finishes off runs. And we were asking some of the Texas defensive players about him. And anytime you hear a defensive player goes, oh, he likes to get downhill, that is the ultimate compliment. That means that they know their hands are full with him because he's running between the tackles. We didn't even know who he was. Kirk and I were at the Yard House in Arlington, and that was Texas OU week. Remember, Duck? And they had the game on. It was
it's K-State, wasn't it?
K-State and Oklahoma
absolutely.
State. And we had all picked K-State, of course. And this guy is just trucking people, running past them, shaking them, juking them. And I'm like, who the hell is this? And I think that was his coming out party, Jen. I think that's when the mullet decided we're going to give him the ball, and our fortunes are going to rest with this guy. And what you've seen since then is history. He's a grown man playing a college football game, and it's going to be fun to watch. He's probably, of all the guys I've seen this year, he's the one that I'm most looking forward to seeing live because I've seen the highlights. I want to see him live. Taj Brooks last week was really good, but I think this guy's better.
He should win the running back Heisman.
Yeah. The Doak Walker
category. Yeah, exactly. He's that good.
Yeah. It's interesting because his numbers are actually not as good as Chuba Hubbard, who was a standout running back for Oklahoma State a couple years ago. But guys, seems like to me he's got the highlights when it comes to the Doak Walker. I mean, you guys, like I said, you've seen some great running backs at Texas, and those guys got the numbers. But if you get the highlights, that really puts you in a different level. Like that jump to score the touchdown in the second overtime last week against BYU. That's the type of stuff voters love.
That was sick.
Yeah. He's had some Heisman moments, no question about that. Well, the question I'd have is the first 3 games, they barely used him. I think he totaled 109 yards, and now he's got 1,580. I mean, what took Mike Gundy so long?
Yeah, well, you could say that about Oklahoma State in general. Those first 3 games were not reminiscent of what we've seen out of the Cowboys since then. So
South Alabama, I was looking at the scores that week, and I go, They got, was it 33-6, Jen?
It was
So it
33 to
was 30
7. Yep.
33-7. And it said USA. I go, did they just play the national team? I mean, I'm sitting there going, USA? And then it was South Alabama, and that was in Stillwater.
Yes.
Befuddling.
Yeah.
What happened there? I mean, you tell us.
Now, that was one of the worst losses I've seen by any team I've covered ever. I mean, they were dominated that day, guys. And you mentioned our friend the Mullet a little bit ago. And I think what happened is they realized they had to start running the ball. They had to get rid of some of the RPO game so they could get Ollie Gordon running downfield better. I mean, they've really simplified the offense. I don't know if that wins the game against a Texas run defense that's as good as they are, but that was a big turnaround for Oklahoma State. And I'm curious, as we talk about Mike Gundy, we got to talk about Steve Sarkisian, because obviously, guys, he was brought in to get Texas back to this point. They're not yet in the playoff. I think they've got a chance. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but to get them back to 11-1, playing in the Big 12 title game, what do you guys think is the biggest moment or the biggest factors for Sark to get this team now looking like they're maybe the Texas of old?
Yeah, he finally got the roster he wanted. He wasn't happy with the roster that Tom Herman left him. He had something like 19 receivers. That's not exactly how you go into the SEC. So, he's made no bones about it. He wants large human beings, and he's got them. And I think the offensive line, defensive line, two biggest keys, to this football team. And that's how you're going to win in the SEC. That's how you're going to win big-time football. And that and the quarterback. You got to have a really good, reliable, if not outstanding quarterback if you're going to be a CFP contender. And so I think those two factors up front, both sides of the ball, and Quinn Ewers, that quarterback, has been outstanding.
Yeah, the number one thing is size. He always, even before he even coached a game, we got to get bigger. We got to get bigger. And I think that the two lines it's the most important facet of the game. And they're probably the guys that people talk the least about. But bigger is better in football. And he'll take a big team over a fast team any day, because you can find some skilled people. And he speaks a lot about culture, Jen, and he's fostering a feeling of togetherness and unity in that locker room. Weeded out some bad apples that did not share his vision. We saw the video of Bo Davis, his defensive line coach, cussing out guys, and a player actually leaked it to the media. I'm presumably a bad apple that they got out of there, and he got the buy-in that he needed. And you got to have players. Bijan Robinson, he inherited Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson, who are NFL running backs now, and did a good job of recruiting. Top 5 class. His first recruiting class was top 5. So he's checking a lot of boxes right now. And the difference between a good coach and a great coach is consistency. We'll see if he can keep this up. By all indications, he can. And we know his story's well documented. The USC thing, getting fired, the drinking. He's thankful for a second chance, and he's making the most of it.
How much pressure was he under, Sed? I mean, obviously, Texas wants to win like this every single year, but I think there had to be an appreciation for it was going to take a minute. I mean, you can't go from 19 receivers to big defensive and offensive linemen overnight. But what was the pressure on Sark heading into this year 3? Was it pretty high?
Yeah, 13-12, Jen.
Yeah.
13-12 in his first 2 seasons. That's not getting it done. At $6 million a year, 13 wins. So there were obvious questions about him, and the team's inability to hold on to second half leads. Blew a lead in Stillwater, blew a lead in Ames, and Breece Hall famously said, 5-star culture wins over 5-star players. And, they took that personally. And so there's a lot of pressure on him. And kudos to Kirk Bohls, the Osage, said at the beginning of the season that they'd go 11-1, and they did because Kirk Bohls said so. That's the only reason it happened. And I had them at 9-3 because I'm realistic and smart, and so they got it done, and relatively healthy. That helps. That always helps. Quinn Ewers missed some games, but they were able to keep the train on the tracks with Malik Murphy, and so I love how he's constructed the team. I love how the guys seem to really enjoy one another. That's not always the case in football. And, none of this means anything if they don't win on Saturday. I mean, it's a big step forward this season, but they have no interest in going back to San Antonio for the Alamo Bowl. And I don't know that would happen even with a loss, but they definitely believe that they are a top 4 team. And who can blame them? They beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa by 10 points.
Absolutely. Okay, Sage 1. Why did you think this was an 11-1 team before the season started? Like said 13-12 the last 2 years. Why was 11-1 possible in your mind?
Well, they had all the elements, like I mentioned, that balance. And one thing that Sark says every press conference on Mondays and Saturdays after game is, I love our versatility. We can win games in different ways, with special teams, on defense, making a stop, can outscore people. And they had a great quarterback. And a few of the things, the offensive line was a year older, came back intact. That was big. And then getting A.D. Mitchell, the transfer from Georgia, who'd scored touchdowns in every Georgia playoff win. And he shows up to balance and complement Xavier Worthy. So, usually Xavier gets the double teams, but I don't think A.D. Mitchell's dropped a pass all year. It's according to Pro Football Focus, what I looked at a week or two ago. So they just got better. They weren't satisfied. They got more experience. They bought in, and it said this is a coach who never won 10 games in a regular season at Washington or USC. Now Washington was a rebuild, and he left USC earlier than they had planned. But they haven't won 10 games in a regular season since 2009, Jenny. So they were starved. They were starved for it. And I think, as said, he's really connected with these players really well. And Sed's written about the culture of the team and how it shaped it. And this week, Jenny, they mentioned how when they practice in the stadium, they look to the east side and they see those numbers for the national championship, the years. And they want to be up there and winning Big 12 championships. So it was a hungry team, and they're starved for this. And they're kind of playing with that old swagger, that they used to have. But it's all moot if they don't get it done on Saturday, like Sed said.
Yeah. Let's say they do win. Let's say they beat Oklahoma State. Obviously, there are some other games that are going to be played that have an impact on this. But is this a team that is CFP worthy? I think they are, but what in your mind would go into the committee saying yes to Texas and maybe no to some of these other teams that are in the same ballpark as them? Kirk, what do you think?
Well, they got to have some help because you got 5 Power 5 conferences. 4 of them have undefeated teams in, and if they win out, Texas is screwed and probably going to the Cotton Bowl or maybe to the Fiesta Bowl. We're hoping not San Antonio. We've been to San Antonio. And for God's sake, they beat Alabama on the road. And it drives me crazy, Jenny, when I listen to Sirius Radio and different stations saying, well, that was a long time ago. They played them and beat them when it was scheduled, okay? And only Alabama gets rematches, like when they did it with LSU. So that you should get credit. And as an AP voter for 6,000 years, I give teams credit when they schedule big. Georgia, Michigan played a bunch of, cupcakes, and it worked for them. But they have the name, and Texas hadn't been Texas in quite a while. So, I mean, the next 4 years, Jenny, Texas plays Michigan twice and Ohio State twice, and some pretty decent teams in the SEC. So they're going to have that schedule advantage. So I think the fact that they beat Alabama, biggest non-conference win of the year, I think they should get in if one of these beaten teams, probably Florida State, happens to stumble this weekend.
Yeah. Said, I know you wrote about what Steve Sarkisian thinks about this earlier this week. Statesman.com, by the way, if people want to go find y'all's work, I know it's out there. But yeah, I mean, he's saying, hey, listen, we feel like we're worthy. I think a statement win might help on Saturday if they not only beat Oklahoma State, but beat them pretty handily. But I don't know. I mean, obviously a lot of different things going on here, but this feels like a team that could go and play in the playoff and do pretty darn well.
I think it's a team that nobody wants to play. Who's besides Ohio State, who has Michigan beaten? And Sarkisian, you have to give him credit. He said, Alabama was 52-1 at the house, and they went in there and beat them by 10 points.
Came from behind, no less.
And here's what people aren't talking about, Jen. They should have beat them here. They're one Ryan Watts sack away of Bryce Young from beating them here. On fourth down, he just came in too hot on his blitz, untouched, and Bryce Young did Bryce Young things and made the play. So I just think that the Longhorns have a good resume. I don't know if they need to smash Oklahoma State this weekend. They just need to beat them and hope Florida State loses. That's what I think. And I don't know if the committee has the stones to jump. I guess they probably would. Alabama probably would jump them with a win over Georgia. It is Georgia. And we're
yet
all
Texas beat them. Texas beat Bama.
And yet Texas beat Bama, and it's wrong on so many levels. And I would hate to see that happen. I don't want to see two SEC teams in the top four either. I think that would be unfair to Texas. So, like I told Kirk the other day, if they don't get in, they're going to really rue the day they let Oklahoma off the hook in Dallas, because they have that game. And they went conservative defensively, and Dylan Gabriel made them pay. And good credit to Dylan Gabriel, who's a gamer. But Texas had that game won and didn't close the deal. But I think that Texas is worthy. Don't know that they will get in, but I think they are just as good as those other 5 teams in front of them. Are they 7 still?
And you know what, guys? If
they're 7 still, right?
If Alabama wins and Texas wins, and they put the tide in over Texas, this selection committee is going to reshape college football, because they're going to send a message: don't play anybody outside of your conference. It works for everybody else. At least Florida State played LSU, and they have their annual game with Florida. But for the rest of them, it's like just a bunch of powder puff. Don't play anybody, and that's terrible for the game. That's terrible for the fans, the sport.
But it's moot, Duck, with the 12-team playoff coming. I mean,
that does help.
But you know what? That's a good point, said. So it makes me think: are we going to see even less of these big intersectional games, or maybe there are 12 of us that getting in, and you schedule that one team, and maybe you'll get a bump up. But it'll be really interesting what kind of message they send.
Yeah, for sure. The chaos that could ensue seems pretty high, depending on some of these results on Friday and Saturday. As we're talking about Texas and how good they are and could they get into the playoff, let's not forget OSU is 9-4 against the Horns since Colt McCoy said goodbye to Austin. So this is a program Texas is facing on Saturday that seemingly has the Longhorns number. I mean, let's not forget that. What has to flip? I mean, obviously, there's been some not good Texas teams involved in that, but there's nobody in the league that's been as good against Texas during that stretch of time than OSU. So what's got to change on Saturday?
I'll go first. Quinn Ewers got to play better against Oklahoma State. 19 of 49 last year.
That was not good.
30 incomplete passes in one game. And so it was easily his worst game. And the coach left him in there with a proven backup in Hudson Card waiting in the wings. So if anything, it showed faith in Quinn. But, man, we were like, man, you got to bring the hook on Quinn Ewers. And the jury's still out. Jury's still out on Quinn Ewers. He was earlier this year, before the season, listed as the number 8 overall pick in next spring's NFL draft. You're not seeing that anymore. You don't see him as a top 10 pick anymore with such a fat quality quarterback class that's coming out. So he's got a lot to prove. And Duck asked him if he was coming back. He doesn't know if he's coming back. And they've got Arch Manning waiting in the wings. And so it's an interesting quandary or dilemma or whatever you want to call it brewing here. But he has to play better. He can't go 19 of 49 this week, and they're not going to throw it 49 times. But I think Sarkisian's kind of figured out that it's better to be more balanced and not to put so much on Quinn's shoulders, because he's way better than he was last year. Proved that in Alabama. What a great performance by him. But he's got to be better against Oklahoma State.
That's the only game he's thrown 3 interceptions. He's had 20 starts, 3 picks against the Cowboys, 2 picks against OU. In 13 of those games, he had 0, interceptions. So he's got to be clean, and they got to bring the pressure on Bowman. They've had 11 sacks the last 4 games. They've kind of picked up their pass rush, but neither one of these teams are real good in the secondary if you go by the stats. They got some talented people, but quarterbacks could really tell the tale. Even though everybody's focused on Gordon, and it should be, these quarterbacks are going to have to bring it. And as far as Gundy having Sark's number, it's just, I think, how teams take their personality from their coach, and I think they do that with Gundy because he's this feisty Bantam rooster. I don't know if you've ever experienced that with him or not, but
I may have some experience. Yes.
Okay, but and I think they don't panic. I mean, I was watching the game Saturday, Jenny, and it's like you show him on television, he's just calm, doesn't really change expression, and so I like their resilience. And considering the bad start they had, to come back, with the record and be in the Big 12 title game 2 times in the last 3 years is very important. And for moving forward, I think Oklahoma State has a real chance to kind of be one of the preeminent powers in the Big 12, along with K-State and probably Utah.
Yeah, I would agree. Hey, before we let you guys get out of here, let's talk about the vibe around Austin, around Longhorn Nation. Obviously, Jerry World, Dallas, lots of Texas fans around. This is obviously Jerry World's getting turned orange because both teams are orange, but is it going to be particularly burnt orange? Do you feel the Texas faithful just really riding this whole thing as far as they can?
They better, because when are they going to get back? They're going to be in the SEC next year. I mean, they just are. They're going to be in the SEC next year, and they still got to deal with OU. And those pesky Aggies are going to be on the schedule. So I wrote last week, this may be as good as it gets for a while. And I don't expect Texas to lay down in the SEC. But there's a whole kettle of worms that they got to deal with moving forward. We've known over the years that usually if you beat Oklahoma, you're going to probably get to the Big 12 title game. They can beat OU next season and end up back in the State Farm Independence Bowl for whomever. I don't even know what it's called anymore. So
I want to go to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. That's all I know.
Which one?
Pop-Tarts.
That's Orlando, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I want to go to that one. I don't know.
Bowl.
Which one, Doc?
Tequila Bowl.
Tequila Bowl.
Where's that one?
Or Margarita Bowl. I just made it up. So
I think that's wherever Kirk is. That's what.
You go to that bowl every day.
Bowls are supposed to be parties, they're rewards, everything. Yeah, I think. Yeah. You know what's funny though, Jenny, is that I wonder if they will not be as fired up as they were last week on Friday night. Packed house, night game, fireworks, senior night, home game, all the stuff with Brett Yormark going on. It was a fever pitch and electric. And obviously everything's on the line on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. But Texas better bring it, because I don't know if, everybody was kind of thinking, well, maybe Texas OU, could have the rematch, and they might have even exhaled a little bit because OU beat them this year. Dylan Gabriel's, probably the Big 12 quarterback, all-conference quarterback probably. So it's going to be really interesting, and, I wouldn't pretend to say, oh, they're going to be flat, but you wonder, would they be a little overconfident playing a 3-loss Oklahoma State team? That'd be very dangerous if they were.
They know better.
They almost lost to Houston, Sid.
Yeah, but they're a product of those lessons. If they're not up for this game, when are they ever going to be up?
Well, and I don't know about you guys, but if Texas wins, my eyes are going directly to the stage where Brett Yormark is going to present that trophy to Steve Sarkisian. I cannot wait.
He was here last week, but he left at halftime, I'm told.
Oh.
So he didn't get
they put the video of him speaking to Texas Tech boosters. They put that up on the scoreboard in the fourth quarter.
I heard about that.
He was long gone, though.
Classy.
Hey, nothing but fun. All right. Remember, you can go find Kirk and Ced at statesman.com, and their podcast On Second Thought has got a guest coming on this week that might be decent. I don't know. I mean,
Oprah Winfrey is joining us. No, but Kirk, I didn't get to tell you, Oprah canceled. Gail King, she canceled as well. So we're getting Jenni Carlson.
Yeah.
Which is, we'll take Jenni over Oprah and Gail any day of the week.
Absolutely. Listen, I have no idea if I could out-talk them on fashion or books or anything, but I know Oklahoma State football better than they do. So
I know you do.
People can check out you guys, but for everybody who joined us this week, thanks to all of you. If this was your first time hearing or watching the Jenni Carlson Show, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Also, if you like what you hear, please leave a review and direct all negative comments toward the two guys I was just talking to. Remember, you can find all my work at selloutcrowd.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.